Hi, my name is Josh, and today I will be showing you how to install an Ultimate Lock 3000 series on a residential left-hand swing door. Alright, when first installing or removing the screws on the door hinge side, the first thing you want to keep in mind is you want to attack the screws closest to the door frame. So in essence, it's going to be the screws furthest away from the door. So I'm going to go ahead and proceed to remove these. Do this as well. And also on the door side as well. So with these, it's a little different. You want to get the ones closest to the center of the door. So I'm going to go ahead and get this one, and I'll get this one. These two right here, right next to each other. So I go ahead, unscrew those. After you have all the screws removed, the next step is you want to pre-drill the holes for the extra long screws to go in there. So go ahead and take your drill, and the drill bit you want to use is the one that actually comes in the packet. It's going to be this one right here. It's the standard 3.5 inch one. So I'm going to go ahead and start at the top. And the door frame side. Usually you want to hold back the weather stripping if there is any, so you don't damage the door or the weather stripping. After you've pre-drilled all the holes, the next step you want to take is you want to open up the packet that came with the lock, and you want to take the flat-headed ones right here, flatheads. The shorter ones are going to go into the door. These longer ones are going to go into the door frame. So to knock things off, I'm going to go ahead and start with the door frame. So right after you get the screws out of the bag, you want to set your clutch, if you have a clutch drill, to about a 7 or an 8. Right now I have mine about an 8. I have mine on low speed, which is number 1. So I'm going to go ahead, plop that in. I'll start with the bottom ones first. Okay, and now I'm going to go ahead and proceed with the door side as well. So again, I'm going to start at the bottom here. Again, the same clutch speed and everything. these last two up here. After you guys finish, go ahead and reinstalling all the screws on the door frame side. The next step is actually going to be installing the lock itself. So obviously the first step is going to be removing the existing hardware. So I'm going to go here and I'm just going to go ahead and speed through this with my power drill. And finally the mortise. Now after you got everything off the door, the next step is going to be determining whether or not you have a right hand or left hand swinging door. Because depending on what kind of door you have depends on what kind of lock installation you're going to have. A left-hand swing door, the lock install is going to go normal. There's not going to be any kind of abnormalities with it. On a right-hand swing door, if we were to install it on the other side of the door, we would have to flip the lock upside down. So it means when you stick your key in, it's going to go upside down as opposed to straight forward. In this case, it's a left-hand swing door. It's going to go in straight. So the first thing you want to do is you want to install the deadbolt. So we're going to go ahead and take our deadbolt and we're going to go ahead, because this is square. I noticed when we were installing this that it's circular, as you can see here. So all we simply have to do is we're going to have to draw for it, and we're going to have to mortise that in. So go ahead and grab your pencil, if you have one, and just kind of outline the edges that you're going to have to chisel out a little bit so it's as flush. And once you got that, go ahead and take your chisel. Make sure you get all four corners. Okay. After you got your corners, go ahead and pop the lock in there. I'm going to go ahead and try to... Sometimes you might have to give it a little love tap. And as you can see, it's sunk in, so now it's flush. And what I usually like to do is take a screwdriver, just go ahead and stick it in there and see if everything works fine. Occasionally, it's nice and smooth. There's nothing wrong with it. So we're actually going to go ahead and install it. I'm going to go ahead and take the screws out of the screw packet, which I have here. The packet looks just like this. And it's going to be these smaller screws in it here. So I'm going to go ahead, take these screws out, and I am going to use it with my clutch. I'm going to go in slow. You don't want to strip these things out, so make sure you go nice and easy on the drill. So we're going to go ahead here, and I'm going to go. And sometimes I like to just follow through with the hand drill, so hand screwdriver, so I want to make sure I don't strip anything or anything. Again, test. Everything's working out fine. So the next step, after we get the deadbolt on there, is we want to go ahead and we want to install the cylinder itself. So the tail piece, which is the piece at the end of the cylinder, you want to make sure it's horizontal or flat. And you want to go ahead and stick it between the crosshairs right here inside the deadbolt. So you want to go right in the middle of it, like so. And you want to take the platform plate, and for those of you who don't know what platform plate is, if you were to take the lock out of the package, it's not that, it's the one right at the very bottom. Go ahead and take that, and the two other screws that were in that small little packet that I just showed you earlier, and go ahead and stick them through here. And stick them through the two holes you see right here inside the mortise. And it's going to screw right in the back of it, of this cylinder, and this is what holds the cylinder in place and on the door, as you can see. Now, what I like to do is I like to take the drill and I like to finish it 90% of the way to make sure, but don't go 100%, because one thing is if you over tighten this platform, you'll collapse that center hole right there, and it'll make it extremely rough for the lock. So go about 90% of the way, and they kind of just set back. I went about 90% of the way, and it feels pretty good. Well, what you want to do is you want to make sure that the gear goes inside the hole as smoothly as possible. If it's rough, that means the screws are too tight. Go ahead and take your hand screw and loosen it. In this case, mine are loose on purpose, so I can go ahead and angle this. The next phase, after you conclude this is nice and easy, you want to go ahead and make sure this is square with the door. Last thing you want to do is to install this crooked and have the rest of the lock be crooked. So what I do is I take a speed square, which is right here, and I line it up with the edge of the door, like so, and I go down. And as you can see, it's perfectly straight. If it was crooked, to give you a hypothetical situation, it will look something like that. And as a visual, you're able to determine whether or not it's straight. In this case, it is, and the tail piece is directly in the center of the hole, which is exactly what we want. After you've determined exactly where you want this, go ahead and take your hand screw and make sure the screws are snug, but not tight. Tightening, again, will lead to that hole to be collapsed and you'll get a rough. So I'm snugging them right now. And a quick test, just reinsert the gear. It's beautiful, it works, it's nice and easy. So the next phase we're going to go ahead and do, we're going to go ahead and mark the 6 holes that are going to be pre-drilled in the door. And how you do this is you take this piece, the piece with the shock absorber, and you're going to go ahead and stick it right on top of the door, and you're going to line up the 2 curved pieces here with each other. And as you see here, you now see the 6 screw holes that are going to be placed. So what I do in this case, because I usually take a pencil and I'll mark it on lighter doors, but because this is a mahogany door, it's pretty dark. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is take my hole punch, or ice pick, whatever you prefer to call it, and just kind of mark the holes. After I got all my holes marked, the next thing you want to do is you want to go ahead and take a 3/32 drill bit. So I'm going to go ahead and get that ready right now. I'm sorry, not a 3/32, a 1/8 drill bit. So go ahead and take your 1/8 drill bit, torque your drill to drill mode, high power, and go ahead and just pre-drill these holes. Also keeping in mind not to go through the door. So what I usually like to do here is I'll take the drill bit and line it up with the door and see how much I can go in. You don't have to go in much, but just as a rule of thumb, not to go through the door. So I'm going to go ahead and close the door, give me a flat surface to work on. Find the holes I made, which are right here, and I'm going to go ahead and pre-drill. drill just died. Give me 1 second. This is why we keep backup batteries. And finally, the last hole. After you have all 6 holes pre-drilled, the next phase you want to do is a little lubrication. And the purpose of lubrication is it not only keeps the parts in here clean, but it also allows for the lock to be open and close smoothly. The last thing you want to do is install a lock that's rough and hard to open. So what I usually use is a can of Dupoint Teflon multi-use, and I'm just going to shake it up. Open it up, and I want to use this plastic as a little catch reservoir, and you want to spray downwards. You want to spray all that black surface and within the hole itself. So I'm going to go ahead and get that. And also, I need you guys to lubricate these other 2 pieces right here, which is going to be the gear and the security bar here. So on the security bar, you want to get the teeth, and you want to get a little bit behind here. So I'm going to get the teeth real quick, which is done. And on the gear, you want to go ahead and just get the teeth as well, and also this part that goes inside the platform housing. After everything is all lubricated, you're going to go ahead and insert the gear into the security bar and set it to what kind of door you have. Most doors are 2 3/8, some doors are 2 3/4, but in this case I have the standard 2 3/8, so it's going to be at the very end. And I'm just going to go ahead and insert it right here. And I just ran into a problem. If you can see here, you can see the shock absorber, not the shock, sorry. You see the gear is not flush with the security bar here. And the common problem for that is for the tailpiece being too big. So what we're going to have to do is I'm going to take some pliers, and I'm just going to go ahead and break off a little piece of the gear here. So I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. What you do is you just go ahead and take your needle nose vice grips, and I'm going to go ahead and break a piece off. Wants to come out too. Alright, you can see I've taken the pieces out. It's a little shorter. Sometimes you'll run into this. In this case I did. And after you got that, you want to go ahead and reinsert these 2, and now you can see that the gear is flush with the security bar. So after you have this, go ahead and take this plate and stick it right over. And now you just line, again, you have the 6 holes, and there's 2 options you can use here. You can use the 6 screws that come in the packet, which I will find in just a second. You can use these 6 screws that come in the packet, which is perfectly fine, or you can use spare bits that you may have. For efficiency purposes and speed purposes, I actually use a machine screw bit, which has a hex head on it, the same length. It's a number 10 hex screw if you guys are interested in it, but I'm going to go ahead and use those. So I'm going to go ahead, grab 6 of them, and they look a little something like this. Let me go ahead and grab 6, and I'll show you guys. And there's absolutely no difference between these 2, minus the fact that I can install these quicker. And when you're doing multiple locks on a job, time is everything. So I'm going to go ahead and use those. So I'm going to go ahead and take out the bit for it. Set my clutch to about a 7 or 8 again. I want to keep it on high speed because remember I told you it's for efficiency purposes. And I will go ahead and install this. And one thing to note is whether you're using these screws or the ones that come in the packet, you always want to get the middle ones first. So you want to get the top and the bottom middle one. So I'm going to go ahead and start at the top. I'm going to go ahead and start with the bottom. And then from there on out, the remaining 4 screws, it doesn't matter what order you go in because it's firmly on there. Okay, after you have all 6 screws firmly inserted into the lock, the next phase you want to do is to make sure everything is working pretty fluidly. So what I like to do is I like to take the knob and I'll stick it in there and see how it flows. In this case, it's pretty rough. So I have a little trick I use here to kind of free it up a little bit. Sometimes in the packaging we have so many locks on top of each other that these may get squished under a lot of pressure and it might bend these just by a hair, and that hair causes a lot of trouble. So what I do is I'll go ahead and I'll take a screwdriver, a flathead preferably, and I'll stick it right here at the end, and I'll just pry forward towards you, and I'll do this side as well. And then I'll go ahead and I'll check again. And there you go. Nice and easy movements. There's no snag in it. It's as easy as it can get. So the next phase we're going to go ahead and take care of is we're going to be doing the installation of the actual shock absorber itself. The shock absorber, for those of you that don't know what it is, it's this little piece right here. It's the black piece that comes in the lock, and the 2 screws that hold it together come in a variety pack that I call, and they're right here. Is this little packet here, and these packets you're going to be using for the remainder of the lock install. So I'm going to go ahead and pop a small hole in it. And before you go ahead and you install the shock absorber, you want to pre-drill the holes for it, of course. So I'm using again my 1/8 drill bit. I'm switching me to drill mode. And you're going to take the shock absorber, just like so, where the smaller side, as you can see, is inside. So you go ahead and perch it right up against the lock and keep it nice pressure against it. And you're going to notice you have a little leeway to go up and down just by 1/8 of an inch. You want to go down as much as you can and go ahead and just pre-drill the holes. And you will hit the deadbolt, so don't freak out if you hit it. Just back off and go proceed with another hole. Again, these holes don't need to be super deep, so don't worry if you feel like you didn't go deep enough because of the deadbolt. So after you have that in place, the next thing to do is to go ahead and take these 2 screws that come in that packet I showed you and install it. I'm using a drill. You can use a hand drill. I highly recommend that if this is your first time doing it, because you don't want to strip these things inside. So I want to go ahead, go as slow as possible. Here's 1. That's 2. And again, do another test just to make sure it's smooth. Everything's perfect, everything checked out just the way we want it to. So, the next thing to do is to go ahead and to install the faceplate. And before you actually go ahead and install this faceplate, a good thing to do right before you do is to record that serial number inside. In this case, here it is. We have the computer system that the customer will be able to activate their warranty on, and you as an installer are required to go ahead and write this on your end. So I highly advise doing this before you proceed, because if you forget, you're going to have to remove all the face plates and all the locks you did and write it down. So you just might as well go do it now. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my pencil. Actually, better yet, I'm going to grab my cell phone and just take a picture of it. 1 second. Just going to go ahead and take a picture, like I said. 1 second. Okay, simple as that. After you have the picture or you wrote down the serial number, go ahead and place the lock on the door, and you're going to take these 2 itty bitty little screws that again came in that multi-pack I was telling you about, and you can see just how small they are. And these, I don't care how good you are with your drill, you want to do these with a hand screwdriver. So take your number 2 screwdriver and of course these small little screws, and go ahead and proceed to install. And when you're doing this, again, make sure you don't over tighten, make sure everything's snug. If you over tighten this, you're going to feel it when you go ahead and install the knob. It's going to be rough. So if that's the case, just loosen these a little bit, just means you over tighten them. Not going anywhere. Just do a quick test. And after you go ahead and do that, you want to take your this screw right here, which is going to be used to tie down the knob. So I'm going to go ahead and install that. And then also another note to remember is when you're installing this in the locked position, keep the thumb screw horizontal, and when you unlock it, it's vertical. It just keeps everything organized, so to speak. So if you're doing multiple locks, you know, the customer doesn't have to remember which way is what. It helps them out. So again, everything checked out smoothly. So the next phase to do after the installation of the lock is going to be the striker plate. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how to do that in just a second. All right, this is going to be part 3 of the installation of the ultimate lock. Part 1 was the hinge, part 2 is the lock itself, and part 3 is going to be the striker plate, which most importantly is the most important part of the entire install. So the first thing you want to do is just go ahead and remove the old striker plate. And after you remove that, the next thing you want to do is you want to go ahead and close the door, and I'm going to go ahead and do that and show you what you need to mark. So I'm going to go ahead and close it. And just before you actually close the door, you want to open the deadbolt just by a hair. You can see there, I haven't bet that much. And the purpose for that is you want to go as close to the door frame as possible. You see that little sliver here? That's what we want to measure. So you want to take your pencil, and my pencil's right here, let me grab it. And you want to mark the top and the bottom of that deadbolt. Again, top and bottom. When you go ahead and remove it, you can see the 2 lines I've drawn there. The very next phase you want to establish is you want to see if the door is flush with this part of the door jamb. In this case, I'm relatively flush, maybe a hair off, which is fine. We can always reposition the striker plate for that, but for the meantime, it's good. The second thing you want to look for is to see how much space you have between the door and the door jamb itself. What that does is it calculates whether or not you can do a surface mount installation or if you need to go ahead and do a mortise in. But in this case, because we have a nice little mortise in to keep everything looking aesthetic as possible, we're going to go ahead and just mortise that in just for the sake of aesthetics. But in most cases, if it's not mortised in like that, you can just pop a surface mount with this much of a gap. So to conclude, to take things a little further, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take the striker plate, take it out of the wrapper, of course, and I'm going to open the door. 1 second. And I'm going to take the 2 feet that you see here, and the lines that I drew on the door are going to fall somewhere in between these 2 feet as evenly as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and pop that on there. And just like I wanted, it's right in between the 2 feet. I don't know if you can see it, but the lines are right inside of it, which is just what we want. The next phase, because I am mortising this one in, is you want to draw the top and bottom of the surfaces of the lock. So here's the top, here's the bottom, and also the back end. And you can see the lines I've drawn here as well. In this case, I have weather stripping, and we want to remove this before we proceed any further. So I'm going to go ahead and take the staples out with my hole punch or ice pick. I want to take my metal shears. I want to go ahead and cut it. So right where the line is I drew. Again, the line's right here, so. Never get this to cut. Be careful also not to cut yourself. I mean, it is metal, so keep that in mind. In this case also as well, as you can see, I drew the back of the striker plate right here that I'm outlining. It doesn't interfere with this back weather stripping, so you don't have to sit there and waste your time removing it. It was just this top half that I needed to deal with. So after we got that, the next thing we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and I'm going to take my Dremel and I'm going to outline this out. I'm going to show you how to do it. So I'm going to go grab it real quick. 1 second. Okay, I have my Dremel multi-tool, and this is a nice little device that you can use as an electronic chisel. If you do not have one of these, you can hand chisel this out. I highly recommend getting one of these if you're going to be doing these on a regular basis. But anyways, let's get started. It is a multi-max Dremel if you're curious. I'm going to go ahead and set mine to a low speed. I usually set mine to about a 2, and I call this the outlining phase. I'm going to go ahead, set it to 2, outline the lines I've drawn. After I got them outlined, I'm going to go ahead and crank up the power, and I'll go ahead and proceed to remove the pieces. Go ahead and crank up the power. After you have that, just make sure it's nice and clean. Mine's came out pretty well, so I'm pretty happy with that. The next phase is after you have a nice little outline of where exactly your striker plate's going to go. It's just flip it upside down where it's flat, and just stick it in there and see how it feels. It fit in there pretty well, which is good. Flip it back, stick it right between those two lines you drew earlier, and grab your pencil and mark inside of the two main holes, not the smaller holes but the bigger ones, and just draw a circle or some kind of marking to indicate where exactly it lies inside of this door frame, or I should say door jamb. And I just did that, and I don't know if you can see it, so I'm going to shine a little light on it. You can see I have one here, and I have one here as well. So, in this case, I'm going to go ahead and take a spade bit. If you have a Forstner bit, you can use that as well. I'm going to use a spade bit for this presentation. I'm going to go ahead and grab it. And this is a spade bit. I do use a 5/8 spade bit. And I'm going to go ahead and just use my drill, which I call the workhorse. And this part does get extremely messy, so I highly recommend putting something on the ground, such as a tarp, to prevent a massive cleanup that you're going to have to do after the install. Anyways, proceeding. The phase you're going to have to do here is there's two circles you drew inside of that striker plate. I want you to go ahead and take the spade bit or Forstner bit and take that tip part and stick it right in front of the marking you did. Not on it, not behind it, but just a hair in front of it, like right at the beginning of that circle, so to speak. Just push it in there a little bit, and you want to go in about as much as these dimples are here. So if you keep that in mind. You want to make a 2-inch hole in the door, so as much as you need to satisfy that. I'm going to go ahead and go to work. And if you make this, if this happens to you, don't worry. I mean, like I said, it's inside. It's not a big deal. This one was just a fighter. It's a harder wood. Again, you're not in trouble yet. Anyways, go ahead and take your striker plate, plop it on there, and see if it fits nice and flush. In this case, mine came out relatively flush. So after you got that on there, you want to go ahead and close the door and see where to line it up. So I'm going to go ahead and close the door for you guys. I'll move all the tools out of the way. And as I'm closing it, I'm going to take the striker plate, stick it in that hole I just made, as you can see, and close the door. After you have the door closed and that striker plate, like I was saying, line up where it looks about right to your eye. It looks pretty good right about here. But one of the things that you have to take into account is the acceleration distance. The striker plate is not flush this way with the lock. It's too far up, so when you close it, there's way too much acceleration distance. And what I mean by acceleration distance, that's the distance between the security bar and the striker plate. If it's more than 1/8 of space, when someone goes ahead and kicks the door, it's going to have too much space to move. I mean, believe it or not, more than 1/8 of space can be the difference between kicking in your door and not kicking in your door. So you have to account for that. So, like I said, find out where you want it, where it looks just about right, and I'm going to go ahead and mark it because my lines were just a hair off. Okay, open the door. I'm going to show you guys how easy this is to do. Plop it back wherever you drew your lines. And what I like to do is I like to hit it. And when you hit it, you can see I made indentations in the wood. I got one here, and you can barely see that one up there. So what I do is I take my chisel, or I use a flathead screwdriver, whatever you prefer. It gets the job done. And I just go in the corner, and I just kind of sink in, as like so. Just kind of move the material out of the way. Here's one dimple hole, and then I'm going to make another one. Alright, I got those 2 dimple holes carved out, and just test it real quick. Stick your lock in there, or a striker plate in there, kind of hit it into place. In this case, I have to go further back, which I need to account for, and I'm going to chisel this wood back here. Just kind of get it out of the way. Same thing here at the bottom. And hammer it in. I'll do it with this so I don't hurt myself. Okay. I want to go ahead and close the door and do a second test. So let me close it here. Stick it in the spaces that I provided for it, and I'm going to close it, and voila, that's exactly what we're looking for. The acceleration distance is less than 1/8 of an inch. It's right in the middle, so it's not crooked or anything. So I want to go ahead and proceed to finish up the installation of the striker plate. The hardest part of the striker plate, like I was showing you, is just lining it up. Installing it is a breeze. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to take my 1/8 drill bit. Before I do that, of course, I'm going to mark it with a pencil or a hole punch. I like to use my hole punch. So line it up right where you like it. Take your hole punch or pencil, mark the holes. Take the drill and just kind of pre-drill the holes. They don't need to be too deep. They just kind of sink in after a little bit. And take, there's 2 screws here. It's going to be these 2 screws. These are what we call our set screws. They're a little bit, about, I don't know, 1/2 inch. You want to follow these in with the hand screwdriver. So take your striker plate. The other one here. And then I got caught in the weather stripping in the back a little bit. Just go ahead and pry that out. There we go. And do one last final test before you pre-drill these holes and eventually stick the 2 3.5 inch screws in. So, final test. Acceleration distance is good. It's perfectly centered. It opens and closes very nicely. So now we have the easy part, and that's just following in with the screws that hold it in place. So take your drill and use the drill bit that came in the packet. I have extras of these, but it's laying around here somewhere. It's right here. It's going to be packet. It looks like this. It comes with the 2 screws and the drill bit. Take your drill, let me plug it in real quick. And with these, you want to make sure you do go in at a 30-degree angle. You don't want to go in straight, because these aren't traditional locks. You don't want to go in a, I don't know, a 90-degree angle. You want to go in right here. It's between extreme, the two extremes, 30 degrees. So. If you have that all said and done, just go ahead and grab your drill bit here. I don't know where to put mine. Set your clutch to about a 7 or 8 again. That's just always good to remember. But do set your power level to a low level. Mine's, in this case, is a 1. But the slow speed in your drill, if you have it programmed in there. If not, just be extremely careful not to strip these. These are soft metal screws, and the reason for that is someone were to kick in your doors, it allows the screws to bind and J-hook within the frame, making it stronger. If they were hardened screws, all it would do is vibrate, weaken the structure. So these are soft head screws. Be extremely careful not to strip them out. So go ahead. And when you do this, try to put as much body weight you have behind the drill. I'm clutching, so I want to go ahead and increase the clutch just a little bit. A little bit more. Again, be extremely careful. Okay. The second one. Sometimes you have to fight these things. You are going into 2 pieces of 2x4. That one went in a little bit more smooth. There we go. Perfect. Now, last final test, and that's just to close and see if you messed up anything. Most likely didn't if you followed all the steps I showed you, but just gonna go ahead and do it. And just like that, you have an Ultimate Lock install. Thank you, and if you have any questions, be sure to email the office at support@theultimatelock.com or leave a comment at theultimatelock.com at the bottom of the actual web page. Or if you are an existing user, just go ahead on the left-hand side, click Register Your Lock, log into the portal, and you can actually report a problem from there. We highly recommend that way. That way you know exactly what lock number you have and so forth. But anyways, thank you, and thank you for taking the time to view this presentation of the Ultimate Lock installation series.